Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our webinar. I'm going to wait a few minutes before we officially start, just in case there are anyone else who still wants to join in the interim. So we'll start in a few minutes, maybe a minute or two. Good. I think we can start. Let me go to my next slide. I want to welcome Lucien, who is our expert from France on e-invoicing. I also want to apologize. We are having some technical difficulties with Lucien's camera. Unfortunately, it's too late to try and toggle and play around now. But as you can see on the screen, that is what Lucien looks like. But I'm sure most of you have heard of him because he's quite an expert in the e-invoicing world in France. Yeah. Next slide. Before we start, I also just want to introduce you to Easy. Easy is a global e-invoicing and VAT e-reporting compliance business or compliance software provider. We have a global presence and we have 25 plus years of indirect tax experience. Our Easy platform is developed entirely in-house by VAT IT. And as you know, e-invoicing mandates are rolling out rapidly at the moment globally. And if you are still looking for an e-invoicing partner, Easy is your go-to company to contact. Good. But let's start. Let's look at today's topic. Today we will focus on e-invoicing and e-reporting in France, the mandate that's upcoming in September this year. And under this mandate, there are three obligations. They are all related but separate. The first one is formal e-invoicing, where structured e-invoice data are exchanged between two domestic businesses in France, where both parties are VAT taxable and established in France. And then the second one is transaction e-reporting, where transaction data are sent to the tax authorities. These flows are not covered by e-invoicing. So basically, this will include international B2B invoices or invoices and B2C transactions. And then the third one is payment e-reporting. This is where payment receipt data are sent to the tax office in a report. And this is basically for services and where advance payments are received, where VAT becomes chargeable upon receipt. So for this webinar, there's a core reminder that a transaction can fall outside e-invoicing, but it can still form part of e-reporting. It depends on the transaction, your business, and also who your customer is. I will now hand over to Lucien, who will take you through a few specific aspects of this upcoming mandate. Lucien is our expert.
Thank you, Yvonne. And again, apologize for the problem of my cam. One thing very important is a critical distinction between of course, outside e-invoicing can still mean inside e-reporting. What does that mean? In fact, e-invoicing is something which is in France. The reform is speaking about the B2B domestic, and after that, we wanted to make more than that because we had in the mind the VAT report. The VAT has also other information, and this information we can find it with the e-reporting. So the e-reporting in French, liable transaction not covered by e-invoicing, but it means you can have B2C operations with non-VAT duty entities, data coming from your electronic cash register, for example. And you can also have, of course, non-domestic operations, so like an exportation or in Europe, B2B international exchanges. So all that covers the perimeter of the French reform. So next slide, maybe. Okay. When e-invoicing applies, so e-invoicing applies when three conditions align. In fact, you need a transaction in France. You need that the supplier and the buyer are VAT taxable person, what I call VAT entities. And third, both are established in France. So that is very important because, for example, when you have a foreign company, everything changed when this, for example, South Africa company would have a permanent establishment in France. So that would be a condition that puts them in the transaction in France and VAT duty person in France. If they have no permanent establishment, of course, it's different. But they can, through the e-reporting, we will see that later, for example, also be in the perimeter of the refund. So a French VAT number, alone does not make a foreign company established in France. That is the difference, because you have a difference between a permanent establishment, see on the direct tax, okay, and the VAT number. You can have no permanent establishment, be a foreign company, a Switzerland company, for example, with a VAT number, okay, and even with a lot of activities. So you have this what Yvonne called a multi-criteria situation, which determines if you are or not in the perimeter of the French reform. So not established foreign businesses. The core rule is when you are not established in France, when you have French VAT number, it's not the same that the French e-invoicing obligation for a French, what we call a French VAT entity. Okay, so the transaction deemed to take place in France, the person is liable for French VAT, and you are not under a VAT exception applies. So what it refers to the codex, the French codex, for example, when you have a business with health, for example, a doctor, medicine things, and so and so. So you have also this article 290 of the CGI, means Code Général des Impôts. In France, it's the French VAT codex. By the way, with the reform, they will change also the codification in September. They will call it the CIBS. So this article focuses on VAT liability, not merely invoicing insurance. So you know that you have also a lot of rules specifically connected to the invoice. Okay, so what is reported and what is excluded? So in the scope of when VAT liability, of course you have we had a word before, the international B2B transaction subject to French VAT. So why do we want e-reporting? Because you need, for example, to know if you have sent goods to Germany, if you receive goods from the Netherlands, if you make an exportation to the United States of America, etc. All that is also required with the e-reporting. Okay. Then after I had a short word also, the B2C transaction liable for French VAT, unless OSS applies. So here it's very important because in France we have a very strong focus on the B2C data, and now we want I would say something which is more exigent than before. Reporting, before you made a global reporting on your VAT return once a month, okay, before the reform, okay, once a month you upload globally your turnover. Now you have, for example, each 10 days, so it's infra VAT return, you have also to make this e-reporting. So you have to send, a company has to send to his PA, to his platform, accredited, has to send also the data each 10 days concerning the B2C. That's very new and very specific to France. And of course, you have also, because we want to make a survey and to improve the payment of the invoices, status and payment data for services. So we have a special rules with the services concerning the VAT payment. If you want, the VAT it has to be paid when you has to be collected and returned to the state when you have been paid. So we have to survey and to control the payment, and it's why we create this status of payment. Okay, so what is excluded? What is excluded? Intra-community supplies. Liability. Okay, export, all that you have not VAT, but it's in the perimeter of the reform, but it's not, you have no VAT on that. VAT exemption, OSS transaction, OSS transaction, it's when you have electronic businesses, that. Before it was the MOS, now it's the OS. And of course, reverse charge, that's also reverse charge situation. So this is excluded when you say you will not put VAT on it if you want, but it's in the perimeter because we report also that. So it's a little bit complex to understand because we have to master all these different, I would say, tax rules. Okay. So VAT exemption removes transaction from e-reporting scope for non-established business. I give you a little example. Imagine that you have a South Africa company which has no permanent establishment in France. Okay, if they make, for example, an importation of good in France, okay, it is outside the scope of the reform. Okay, but if they made, for example, intra-community supplies, even if they have no permanent establishment, they have to make a e-reporting to the through a PA. So they have to choose a PA. It's what is very sometimes complex to understand for a non-French company. Okay, next slide. So the key dates and company size have also importance for the beginning and the requirement. So I would say that all companies will have to choose a PA and will be concerned by the reform by the first September, because of course they have all to receive invoices, so they cannot receive now invoices without having chosen a PA. So everyone is concerned. Okay, but only the large company and what we call in France the intermediate companies have to issue also invoices on an electronic way now with the 1st September. So you have the possibility, if you are a small company, a medium company, to issue mandatory your uh, invoices. You have 1 year, I would say 1 year and 2 months. So, and that starts then in the 1st September 27. Also for the foreign companies, if they are concerned, they have also this delay, I would say, to the September 27. So postponement clarified by official impôt.gouv.fr, that is our website from the tax authority. You can find a lot of details concerning all the reform. And you will also see that we have now a huge documentation. If you go on this website, I invite you to have a look on that. That's a good link. Okay, maybe next slide. Now, how do you know if you are a small, a micro SME? So all that was defined by the tax authority. Okay, so in fact, you have to consider different figures, different things. First, the turnover, I would say, then the assets of your company, okay, in the balance sheet, and of course the number of employees. So you see, with this different definition, you can see if you are a micro, if you are a SME, ICE, what we call intermediate company, or a large company. You have also to know that the large company in France are maybe 5,000 or eight, not more than 5,000. I would take another a number, let's say less than 6,000 companies. So the most companies in France are here in the micro and the SMEs. Okay, so these companies also, they have to understand how it works. What is important also is when you are a group, you can sometimes opt also for a unit group. So you have to understand if it's each company of the group who has to be considered. If you are not under a special group VAT regulation, or if each company has to be then considered as a VAT entity. Okay, so this reference date is here assessed on the 1st January 25. Legal unit is the company on a SIREN basis. Okay, in French we have SIREN. It's an official ID number, I would say, of a company. And then after you are under it, you have the SIRET. It means you can have a company with different establishments. So each establishment will be under the same SIREN, but each one will have a suffix number at the end of the SIREN, which determines what we call the SIRET number. That is important also for the annuary, because after we will send the invoices in function of this SIREN, SIRET, and even what we call code of directory, in French code routage, because sometimes inside of an establishment of a SIRET, you can have a code routage, a special service which will be liable for receiving and sending the invoices. Okay, so I will not go too deep in that, but move up rules, and the company moves to the next category when the workforce, of course, or threshold are exceeded. So it's something which can move and which can change, of course. So you have to be careful with this uh, definition, and the best is always to check it with an expert. Okay, maybe next.
Good. Thank you, Lucian.
Oh,
Thank you for your insights. I think I also learned a lot today.
okay.
We at Easy often receive questions from businesses with different transactions, mostly non-established businesses or not established for VAT purposes businesses. Um, would you mind taking us through a few specific scenarios and just explaining to us what would happen in certain cases so that our listeners and even me can
Yes, yes,
get a
Yvonne.
better understanding?
That,
Thank you.
that is
Good. So I think our first scenario, Lucian, what happens when a taxable person that's not established in France transfers their own goods from France to another EU member state?
yeah. This scenario is very frequent. So
Yeah.
in this case, we are speaking about what you have note here: transfer, treated as an intra-community supply. So in fact, for example, you have your own goods, okay, that you need. They are in France, but you want to transfer them to Germany. Okay, so you are not selling them in the first time, so it's considered as the concept of transfer. You're in fact your own goods are going from France to Germany, but you are not selling them. In fact, but it's an intra-community concept also, I will say. So, and it's considered as a transfer. So first you have no VAT on it, of course, on this transfer. The liability test is only relevant after checking exception. So you have, of course, make to be sure that it's a transfer and not selling of goods. So you have also to set up, I would say, what we called liable control in order to not to avoid frauds. It's that that is the subject, and because the transaction is exempt, it falls outside of e-reporting for non-established person. Okay, so VAT liabilities, no French VAT due. Yes, it's an exception. And e-reporting, there in this situation there is no e-reporting. You are not liable on doing an e-reporting for this kind of operation.
Thank you. That brings us to scenario two. What if a French established supplier sells goods in France to a non established buyer that does not have a French VAT number?
Okay, so what is always a difficulty is to understand the nature of the buyer. Here it's typical the case. Okay, here you say, for example, you have a bee, a French bee. Okay, and you are selling goods in France. So you should say, if I'm selling goods in France, it's something with a VAT. Okay, but you have exception. For example, if it is a non-established buyer, okay, and this non-established buyer, this transaction is then can be under a system, I would say, of uh, reverse charge, because there is a special disposal of the law which make possible in this case that you don't put VAT, if you want, on the invoice. Okay, so the French established taxable supplier remains, of course, liable for VAT, but under a system of reverse charge. he has to make also a mention on the invoice. That's not written here, but it's a special system. It's we call that Article 283, etc. of the CGI. So they have to explain that it is VAT liable, but with a system reverse charge system. And the French established supplier must transaction e-report. In this case, in fact, the French established supplier has from his he has he has to explain that he has get this data, these goods from a French company. It's why you have to make a report, because after that we have to make a control. The tax authority can be aware what happens with this good. This good can be sold by the non-established buyer to a French company, or can be export, or even send in another country. So you have to follow, in fact, this situation. So if you have to follow, you have to make a report. And so VAT liability French supplier, exemption no, e-reporting supplier e-reports. Okay.
Thanks, Lucian. So if I understand correctly, the buyer that does not have a French establishment or VAT number would mean that the supplier who does have that would be liable for the VAT, and they are the supplier, the person who needs to e-report, and they can't send an e-invoice because the buyer
yes,
is not
yes,
obliged
yes,
to
yes.
receive e-invoices.
Yes, you can imagine, for example, that you have the what we called also the directives, the sixth directive of VAT and the eighth directive. So, for example, in some situation, you need to have a VAT return on cost that you have in France. But if you are non-established, you have no VAT number. But sometimes you want to make, for example, an exportation from France. It has no sense. For example, I can give you an example. If you buy goods, you are in South Africa, okay, and you want to send the goods French wine, for example. You don't want to send them first to South Africa, so you will let them in France. Okay, you buy them on a French company in Bordeaux, I would say, but you want to make an exportation of this wine to the UK. Okay, that's an exportation from the French perspective. So in fact, that's typical this scenario too. Okay, you are buying goods and you are sending them then to, for example, to another company. But you have to make a report when you buy them, and also a report for the exportation after that, if I want to be complete.
Yes, perfect. Thank you. I see we're almost running out of time, but we still have a few scenarios that I would like to run through with you, Lucian. I also want to remind everyone that we will send the slides and the answers to your questions after the webinar to your email. So you will receive everything. If you need to drop, you're welcome to drop, but we can quickly look at maybe one or two more scenarios. Lucian, when a French established supplier provides VAT-exempt services to a foreign non-established person, am I correct? I think we can quickly run through this, but am I correct in saying that since there's no French VAT due, and there's an exempt VAT service or VAT exempt service, that's why no e-reporting is
exactly.
required?
So
Perfect. I
that's
think that was an easy one. Even I could answer that.
Easy, and it's logical.
Scenario 4. What if a French established supplier provides VAT subject, so services that are subject to VAT, to a foreign non-established person?
Okay. You have also to know it depends on the kind of service sometimes, because you have service and service. All the services are not following the same rules. For example, we had a discussion about the OS, okay, electronic services, or services belonging to a house or something like that. Or so in this general situation of services, I would say, uh, you have transaction is outside the domestic invoicing because the customer is
Yes.
not established. It's not a B2B, if you want, a B2B transaction. It's a
Yeah.
it's a B to a B international, I would say, if we can say that.
Yes.
And the French established supplier is, of course, always in the field, what we call the field of the VAT, and is liable for VAT. But the
Yes.
supplier must make a transaction. It's a B2BE, I would say, B2B international. So it's an e-reporting for him, okay, and that's it. And of course, for the foreign company, it's nothing. It's nothing because they will get a good outside of a service outside of France. Okay, so it's easy to understand. Typically, you can have services to foreign companies, what I would say, and it's an international reverse charge system. Okay.
Perfect. And then, Lucian, I understand correctly that when it comes to services, a possible payment receipt report is also required by the supplier in this case
Yes,
to
yes,
put
of
some
course, of
confidence.
course. Even if the service is not on the VAT payment because there is no
Yeah.
payment on it, but it's a service, so it's better to always for us have the statute of the payment, okay? Because it's
Perfect.
a mandatory statute. In fact, this idea of the payment has moved since 2023. In fact,
Sure.
yeah, because we
Okay.
were not absolutely in line with the European disposition. So, for
Yeah.
example, we had to change little things. For example, when you have a deposit, okay, before you had no VAT on the deposit, and the deposit was
Yes.
not considered as creating automatically an invoice. So
Yes.
now, since 2023, and of course also inside the reform, imagine that you have a company which asks a deposit. Okay, you have to issue, the company, the supplier has to issue a deposit invoice, has
Yes.
had to make a mention, it's a deposit, had to
Yeah.
make all the consideration of the e-invoicing, of course, and has to, if it's an international situation, e-reporting, okay, and has to follow and to make this distinction, the difference, I would say, that, between goods and services. Uh,
Yes.
that is also new. You have with the reform, they have also introduced new mention. For example, before you had not it was not mandatory to put on an invoice. It's a service, it's selling of good or something mixed. Okay, you go to a car reparator and you want to fix something on your car. You have a service and you have also selling goods. Now you have to make the mention with the reform starting in September of this year between service, goods, and mixed things. Okay, and each line will then report, and each line will then create, if you want, a requirement because it's a service. You have to follow the payment. Okay, it's not a
Yes.
service. You have not to follow it. Okay, it's with the deposit, even if and that's particular its specificity. A deposit, you have to follow the payment, okay, because you have to pay VAT when you are paid. When you receive the deposit, you are paid for a deposit. You have to, you are duty and pay the VAT to the tax authority But at the same time, the company who has paid the deposit, so the client can, the buyer can make a deduction, a VAT deduction. So even if it's a good, that is, it's something special. So you have a lot of little rules, which are in fact
Mhm.
tax rules. So it's my old job because I was a former uh, head officer in the DGFIP, in the tax authority. But I know it's not always easy to understand, especially
Um,
when you mix all that now with the reform.
yes, that's
So
very true.
the PA, like VAT IT, is in fact your guide. The PA has to set up a lot of control, semantic control, syntactic control, and also I would say control concerning the rules. So they have, if a mention is not on the invoice, they have to make rejection of the invoice.
Mhm.
So in fact, you will learn with your PA. And the advice is always prepare yourself before the reform, okay,
Yes,
in order to be maximum in the conformity to avoid rejection of your future
yes,
invoice.
that's very true. Thanks, Lucy. And I think we have two more scenarios left. And I see there's a question in the chat that I think will be answered in one of these scenarios. So I think it would be worthwhile if we look at the last two quickly. Scenario 5, what if a non-established person with a French VAT number supplies goods or services to a French established buyer? So here the buyer is established with a VAT number, and the supplier has a VAT number in France, but they're not established. What happens in terms of e-reporting then?
Yes, in this situation, you see, you have in fact a foreign company with a VAT number, and maybe he has not permanent establishment, but on the point of view of the VAT, they are offered, in fact, in France, and they are doing a service, an operation, selling goods or services to French established buyer. So they are not making an exportation. Okay, so what happens? The French VAT number does not make the supplier an established in France. They have a VAT number because they are doing a French operation, if you want. They are acting on the VAT in the VAT field. So where the French established customer is liable on the reverse charge, the buyer bears the reporting obligation. So here you have also, you create this buyer e-reporting obligation. And for services, you have also to follow, if it's services or a deposit with the good. We just had this discussion before.
Yes.
So you have to follow also what we call the status of the payment data. It's not reported here because the VAT is on the reverse charge, so you have not a payment of the VAT. There is no VAT charged, in fact. So VAT liability French established buyer, exception no, e-reporting buyer e-report, yes, that's it. So in fact, you have always, you see, to consider what is the situation of the supplier, what is the situation of the buyer, and what kind of what is the nature of the operation, service, goods, deposit, uh, all that makes mixed, give you the solution.
A solution. Yes, and I just also want to mention that these types of transactions, the acquisition where the buyer reports the e-reporting, this will kick in only from September 2027. So for
Yes,
now, there's a
yes,
bit of leeway if you fall
yeah,
into this category and you
yes,
are a buyer in this scenario.
absolutely, Yvonne. The enter of the entry of this obligation is
Yes,
reported to 27. You're exact.
2027.
Absolutely.
Perfect. This is our last scenario, so let's quickly run through it. What if two non-established persons with French VAT numbers carry out an internal French transaction under the reverse charge? What will happen here? I think this is the
Yeah,
most complicated one to me.
yeah. Uh, it's maybe also the occasion to explain that, in fact, you see, when you do a thing, things are moving. So you are non-established, and 2 months after you are established. So it depends also sometimes on things which are really changing. I would say invoice after invoice. Huh? So first, so here we are in a general situation. So both parties are not established. That we know that. So the foreign companies, in fact. So it's not B2B domestic. I would say you have not a French company, you have foreign companies. Okay. So they are not in the invoicing field. Okay. Then the person are liable for VAT is the buyer, the customer on the reverse charge. So here the buyer side is reporting starts 27. Okay, it's something like a
Yeah.
reporting, and so no reporting for this case from as you explained, because there was a delay, special delay for this case. So VAT liability non-established buyer, exception no, e-reporting, and starting in September 27. Okay. But as I
Gotcha.
told you, take care, because with the notion of the concept of non-established has to be mixed sometimes with the permanent establishment. Um, you think you are non-established, okay, and then the DGFIP says to you, you are established because you
Yes.
have here a lot of data centers or data warehouse. You have hired a lot of employees, and in fact you tell to us that you are non-established, but you are, or even you have
Yes.
a person, a guy who is working for you, and through this guy you drive a business in France like a French company. So always take care, because you have much parameters to be aware concerning all this situation. So my advice is always go to a guy which will see operation by operation with all the documentation, with the contracts. The contracts have a huge importance on the judgment of an operation. A fiscal operation cannot just be made with, I would say, a Sudoku situation, if you want. It's more complex than easy logical.
Yes. Thank you, Lucian. I think that was all. Just a quick um, reminder that the e-reporting obligation attaches to the person that's liable for VAT. You should look at if a transaction is exempt or not. Um, and yeah, to just make sure if it falls within or without
Mm.
e-importing scope. Yes, I think that was all. There are quite a few questions in the chat and in the questions box, so we will send answers to all of those questions via email to our participants. But I also want to remind, if anyone is still online, that if you have questions that you haven't thought of now, you can still send them through. You can post it here on the chat, even after the webinar is closed, and we will still get notified of those questions and reach out to you. So don't be shy. Reach out to us. You can also send us an email if you have our contact details. But yes, I want to again just thank you, Lucian, for your time. I really appreciate you taking us through all of these complex scenarios.
Thank you, Yvonne. It was my pleasure to present that with you, and it was, I think, very useful for all this situation to go through. It was very interesting.
Yes, I agree. Thank you. Good. We're going to stop the webinar now, but as I've mentioned, please reach out if you have more questions, post them in the chat or in the the question box. We will get back to you.
Bye
Bye,
bye.
everyone.